Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum. Peace be unto you. Welcome to 1 Samuel chapter 14, or First Book of the Kingdoms, chapter 14. There are 52 verses in this chapter. This is a re-upload because the previous recording was not of a good quality, the audio recording. Beginning in verse 1, we see Mesab versus Garrison, which Mesab most likely is the Hebrew word for garrison. Verse 2, on the top of the hill versus the uttermost part. Verse 6, we're going to ignore that one. Verse 7, significant difference here. It says, my heart, this is the armor bearer of Jonathan, my heart is as your heart. So his heart, he's saying, my heart is as yours. We have the same motivations. I'm going to have whatever your heart is like, the likeness of my heart will emulate, will be as your heart. In the Masoretic, it says, behold, I am with you according to your heart. So not necessarily that my heart is as your heart, but I just agree with, I support what your heart does, not necessarily from his heart. So we can see it, it's more heartfelt in the Septuagint. Verse 8, a big difference. We will come down suddenly upon them, so an ambush, versus we will discover ourselves unto them, which means to denude, to reveal, or to uncover ourselves, which makes no sense in the Masoretic. Verse 9, significant difference. Until we shall send you word, versus until we come to you. Verse 10, if they challenged them on the spot, that is the sign. So that's in both translations. That is the sign that these people will be delivered into our hands. I believe that's the Philistines. Verse 14, it says here, with darts and slings, versus, and pebbles of the field, don't want to forget that one, versus within, as it were, an half acre of land, which a yoke of oxen might plow. So the difference here is the Septuagint is describing the weapons of Jonathan, or perhaps the ones that they killed, versus describing the size of the battle area, the battleground. Verse 15, dismay versus trembling. Another significant difference in the same verse says they would not act. They would not act versus trembled. So inaction versus emotion. They were terror-struck versus they quaked. Another significant difference, there was a dismay from Adonai. So notice it's not capitalized there. I think that's a typo. In any case, the dismay came from Adonai. Versus it was a very great trembling. So the credit is removed from Adonai in the Masoretic. Verse 16, significant difference. The army was thrown into confusion on every side, versus the multitude melted away, and they went on beating down one another. So they literally melted away, like in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Is that what happened? Well, we can see the root cause of their being defeated was confusion, and that is from Adonai, as we saw in the previous verse. Verse 18, big difference. Bring the ephod, that's the instruction to Ahiah, because he wore the ephod in that day before Israel. The Masoretic says, bring here the ark of Elohim. So you can't wear the ark. He wore the ephod. Verse 19. Hands versus hand. And I bring this up because recall that Moses was in a scenario where his hands were lifted up, perhaps in prayer or praise, and every time his hands were lifted, Israel would prevail. But when his hands were lowered, they would be losing. So he says here, withdraw your hands. It's interesting. Perhaps it's a Moses-like scenario. Verse 21, big difference. Servants, that terminology being used, which is from the Greek Strong's 1401, which is the word doulos, which means slaves or servants, versus in the Masoretic Hebrews, which Hebrew means one from beyond. So why would the Philistines have Israelites in their camp, is my question. Verse 22, an omission of, and all the people with Saul were about 10,000 men. So that's a detail that is important for historians looking at the logistics of the battle. Verse 23, there's an omission here regarding the battle extending itself to every city in the Mount Ephraim. There's a big difference in 24. Verse 24, Saul committed a great trespass of ignorance in that day, and he lays a curse on the people, saying, Cursed is the man who shall eat bread before the evening. So I will avenge myself on my enemy. And none of the people tasted bread, though all the land was dining. So the rest of Israel was dining, but not the armed forces. Versus the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had adjured the people, saying, Cursed be the man that eats any food until evening, that I may be avenged on mine enemies. So none of the people tasted any food. So the differences here are, number one, this is a curse. Saul placed a curse on the people. And bread simply means food. It's synonymous with that. Just like meat. And scripturally, when they say meat or bread, that means food in general. So I will avenge myself on my enemy. None of the people tasted bread. Okay. Though all the land was dining. So that was omitted as well. The fact that the rest of Israel was eating. Just not the armed forces. Verse 25, and Yaal was a wood abounding in swarms of bees on the face of the ground. Verses, and all they of the land came to a wood, and there was honey upon the ground. So we can see that Yaal was a forest containing swarms of bees. Versus all the land came to a wood. Okay. I'm not sure what that means, but they of the land arrived at the forest, and there was honey on the ground. Verse 26, the place of the bees versus the wood, the forest. And then it says here, they continued speaking versus the honey dropped. Okay. So they continued speaking because they were not able to eat. They had that curse placed upon them by King Saul. There was an omission of Adonai. So they feared the oath of Adonai, although it's not really from Adonai, it's from Saul. Perhaps they considered it as good as coming from Adonai. Verse 27, recovered their sight. His eyes is Yonatan. Verses were enlightened, to light up. So we can see Yonatan was not aware of this curse that his father placed on the people. And that's why this happened. Verse 28, an addition of with an oath. Okay, so they added that right here with an oath. So it's not an oath, it's a curse. Verse 28, continuing on, the omission of bread. We shall eat bread. Where is that? Who shall eat bread? Okay. Doesn't seem to be an omission, but they simply replaced it with food. And then very faint. So I'm going to remove that from the record. It's not an omission. It's still there. Technically. Just replaced with food. Okay, verse 29, destroyed versus troubled. So Yonatan is expressing his emotions, his opinions about this curse, that he's destroying the land versus he troubled the land. Verse 30, surely versus how much more. So the expression is, what this is saying is, this certainly would happen, that the slaughter would have been greater, versus the focus is on the slaughter, which makes this statement redundant. How much more would the slaughter be? Okay. Verse 31, an omission of stone. Oh, not stone. Some of the Philistines. In addition, as well, of to Ayalon. This was a small, not a big slaughter. It was limited to Michmash. Verse 33, out of Gethaim, versus you have transgressed. So the focus is on the stone coming out of Gethaim versus you have transgressed. Verse 34, a calf versus an ox. We know that a calf is a young bull or a young cow, versus an ox, a fully grown adult animal. Slay it on the stone versus slay them here. Verse 36, this night versus by night. So specifically talking about this very same day, but the night portion versus by night could be an extended period of time. Verse 37, if I go down versus shall I go? So this is one question in the Septuagint. Saul asking Adonai, if I go down after the Philistines, will you deliver them into the hands of Israel? One question versus two questions in the Masoretic. Shall I go down after the Philistines? Second question, will you deliver them into the hand of Israel? Verse 38, see by whom this sin has been committed versus see wherein this sin has been this day. So we're going to identify a specific individual, a specific person, versus come see the reason why this sin has been done, not a person. Verse 39, if answer should be against, or perhaps if he, Elohim, should answer or give sentence, versus though it be in Jonathan. 40, under subjection, which could also mean, or you shall become slaves if proved guilty, versus being on one side, the other side. Verse 41, a big difference, an omission of, O Adonai, Elohim of Israel, why have you not answered your servant this day? Is the iniquity in me or in Jonathan my son? Adonai, Elohim of Israel, give clear manifestations. And if the lot should declare this, give, I pray you, to your people of Israel, give, I pray, holiness. So we can see Saul is a little more of a compassionate character here. We can sort of relate to his dilemma. He wants to know, why is this being done? It's a fair question. We're not given this information in the Masoretic. It simply says, give a perfect lot. We don't see this moral dilemma. We don't see this internal battle going on in Saul's emotions. So that's lacking in the Masoretic. Another big difference in the next verse. I sum it up as Saul has lost his mind. He's lost his judgment. Even the people of Israel have more sense than their ruler, than their king. Let's just read the verse. Saul said, cast lots between me and my son Jonathan. Whomsoever Adonai shall cause to be taken by lot, let him die. What did the people say? The people responded, this thing is not to be done. We should not do this, Saul. What are you thinking? And Saul prevailed against the people. They cast lots between him and Jonathan, his son, and Jonathan is taken by lot. So we can see that was omitted. A lot of that. Simply says, cast lots between me and Jonathan, my son, and Jonathan was taken. It's not so simple in the Septuagint, in the actual, the complete story. Verse 45, an addition of God forbid, that expression there. The people versus Jonathan. So the people were successful on account of Jonathan, versus Jonathan worked with God. And it says they prayed for Jonathan and he died not. Versus they rescued Jonathan that he died not. So the people of Israel prayed to Adonai that Jonathan would be spared, his life would be spared, versus the people rescued Jonathan from perhaps his father, from Saul. 47, significant difference of received the kingdom versus took the kingdom. So he took it by force. No, he received it by lot. There's an omission as well of by lot he inherits the office over Israel. And significant difference, he was victorious. Saul was given victory versus he vexed them. No, he didn't just bother them. He had victory. He was given victory by Adonai over these different peoples and kings. Excuse me. Verse 48, wrapping up here. He worked valiantly, versus he gathered a host. So it's interesting to me that although Saul had questionable judgment in this chapter, Adonai still was merciful and gave him the victory. So this was not enough for Adonai to take the throne away from him at this point in time. Trampled on him versus spoiled them. So these are people that trampled on Israel, that's the expression, versus spoiled them. Verse 50, son of a kinsman, this is talking about Abner, versus Abner being Saul's uncle. Verse 51 could possibly be a longer form of Abner, being Ebenezer, because Ebenezer was the father, Ner was his father, and Ner was the father of Abner. It makes sense. However, the son of Yamin was omitted, so this individual named Yamin was omitted, and interestingly enough, Ben means son, and Benjamin, so Benjamin, you could even put that there, but he literally is the son of Yamin. Ner is the son of Yamin, and Yamin is the son of Abiel, or was the son of. So that's all for this chapter. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this re-recording is better in terms of the quality and even the content. So thank you once again. Thank you very much for your time. Until next time, I bid you all Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, and peace be unto you. Maranatha.